My name is Dave Blake. I'm the founder and CEO of ClientSuccess, and we're thrilled to have you join us for another week of great content, best practices, tips, and templates. And we want to welcome all of you and welcome our awesome speaker and presenter, Kristi Faltorusso, who's the Vice President of Customer Success here at ClientSuccess. And today, Kristi's going to talk about all things health scores. So Kristi, welcome. How you doing today?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing great. I am super pumped for this session. And just like I say every week, this is going to be the best one we're going to do. And this is my favorite topic because each week, I swear, I think each of these topics is so critical to every customer success organization. So I'm excited, Dave. We're going to have a lot of good stuff to share today.
Let's rock it.
All right. Excellent. Well, welcome back. So hopefully many of you have had the opportunity to either join us live for part 1 and part 2, or have at least been able to watch the recordings so you get a sense of how we're structuring the content here, right? I'm going to give you the why behind we're doing the things we're doing, how to do them, how I'm doing them here at ClientSuccess, and more importantly, as we send you those recaps, how do you go take what we've shown you and go apply that in your organizations? So as the name states, today is the anatomy of a high-performing health score. We are going to dig into everything from the metrics, the measurement, the data, how do you structure it, the weighting. There is so many, I think unique and cool things about creating and designing and defining your health score. So we're going to get right into it. So like Dave mentioned, please enter any questions that you have into the Q&A. This week, I'm going to be a bit smarter. I closed out that chat window, so I have no distractions, but I will be eager to see anything that's coming through once we recap and shift over to Q&A. So please, as we're going through, drop those questions into that Q&A. And without further ado, let's jump in. All right, so first, I want to start by just setting the stage, right? What are we here to talk about today? I'm sure many of you have heard or seen or have read somewhere defined, what a customer health score is, but I want to share with you how I define it. So this is my definition of a customer health score. So I believe a customer health score is a metric-based scoring mechanism used to predict customer behavior. Right now, and I bolded a couple words here because I think that they're all super important. The first one being metric-based, right? Everything that's coming into your health score should be based on data, and not just any data, the most important data, the data that's going to tell a story for your customers, and whether it's how they're engaging in the partnership, how they're using and adopting your technology, right? All of those elements of data, that's what I'm referring to. Now, the next thing I bolded here was predict. Because if a customer health score is created correctly, it's going to help you predict customer behaviors, good or bad, or indifferent, and allow your team to intervene appropriately. And that's the big thing we'll anchor on today, is not just how do you create this and why it's important, but more importantly, how do you action it? Because I am not a big fan of data for sake of having data, right? If you're not going to use it, what good is it? So this data is more importantly going to help you to predict those behaviors. So almost really like leaning into, well, what is going to happen next as a result of my customer doing what they're doing today? Now, this behavior could be positive and it could be negative. And intervention doesn't have to be negative either, right? You could be intervening because your customer is doing all the things that you want them to do. And as a result, you want to figure out how do you better engage them, right? How do you make them into an advocate? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with customer health scores. They're being used to help us understand what our customers are doing and how do we lean in effectively to maximize their experience. So let's talk about the first part. So you're going to see a theme in how I've titled all these slides, but we're going to start with the data because this is the most important part, right? It's the, garbage in, garbage out concept, right? You got to make sure you've got the right data. And so the way that I think about this is I break it into 5 parts. I break many things down into 5 parts, but starting with this, the first thing is access. Right? It is important that you have access to the right data. And so, you want to make sure that you're pulling in the right data, meaningful data, right? But in order to do that, you need to make sure that you have the ability to to use it. So this is where, you might not know, but it's important to lean into folks like your Salesforce admin or other stakeholders across the business that own different technology, or your IT team, right? Maybe you have a data scientist team, which if you do, you're super lucky. So whomever those folks are, you need to kind of touch base with them and figure out what data do they have and how do you get access to it? Because that's going to be the first thing, right? First, you need to get it. The next thing you need to make sure is that that data is accurate, right? I mentioned this before, but garbage in, garbage out, right? You need to make sure that the data you have is accurate. Inaccurate data is not going to help inform you and your team correctly, right? So you've got to make sure that you are looking at this, that it's sanitized, that it's correct, right? Anything coming from compromised sources is going to impact your ability to really use and leverage this effectively. The third thing is currency. Now, we understand different technology updates data at different paces. Not all data is real time, right? So you can't just assume that everything is from today or immediate or the last hour. So you've got to understand the currency, and it's okay, right? Some data can be monthly, some data can be weekly, some can be daily or hourly. It depends, but it's more important to understand that currency than it is to say that they all need to be on the same page, because that currency will allow you to lean in and guide how you're going to use it, or when you might want to start to report out certain things. And so that currency understanding is going to be critical. The fourth one is you got to make sure it's impactful data, right? Data that isn't going to influence your team to do the right things at the right time isn't going to be helpful, right? So you've got to make sure that you figure out what the right data is. I'll tell you, I've done this a couple of times. You never get it right out the gate. So sometimes it's trial and error. You're going to need to figure out sometimes maybe what that impactful data is. So maybe you start with 5 things, but then over time you realize that, you know what, you're not going to be able to use certain things because it's not the right things to focus on. So making sure it's right, that's something you'll get to over time. And that last part is that it's integratable. You've got to be able to pull all the data together. And I'm very big on data democratization, right? We've talked about that over the past 2 weeks, but being able to get all of your data to talk to one another, whether it's in Excel or Google Sheets, or you're using a sophisticated technology like ClientSuccess, whatever the case may be, pulling that data together to enable it to talk and tell your team what to do is really critical. So those are the 5 things that I would say you need to make sure of, right? So you have access to that data, your data is accurate, you understand how current that data is, that you've got access to the right data, that data that's going to drive impact, and that it's integratable, right? So you could pull it all together so you have access to it. It could be through an API, through connectors, but it could be through a system that you're porting it into. But whatever it is, got to pull it all together. So that's my 5 points on making sure you've got the right data. Because again, this is your foundation. This is where it all starts. So if you don't go through these steps, if you don't go through this exercise, you do not pass go. You cannot advance to the next step. You have to do this first. So please go make sure that you understand all the elements of your information. The next thing to think about is the metrics. So listen, I've created probably some of the most complex and comprehensive health scores out there. And I've also created some really simple ones. Then the other cool thing that I have the ability to do is also see how our customers or clients at ClientSuccess are using their metrics. And so what I'm showcasing today are 8 metrics. These are not the only 8. These do not need to be your 8. You don't even need to use all 8 of these. These are the 8 most common used metric categories. And so I want to introduce them because as you're starting to think about either creating your health score for the first time or modifying the one that you have, maybe you're at a point right now where you started off very simple, but now you want to start to advance it and figure out what are some other components or metrics you could pull in. This should hopefully serve as a guide to help introduce additional information. So the first one is engagement, right? This is how is your customer engaging with you? This could be looking at a whole slew of things, right? From your calls, your on-sites, executive business reviews, or core meetings, as I call them, right? But how is your customer staying engaged? And what that cadence of engagement looks like. The next one is usage. So this is, how is your customer or your end users using your product? And so when I look at usage, I'm thinking about, logins and license consumption, things of that nature, which is slightly different than that third category, which is adoption. This is more looking at or focusing on how your customers are using your technology. Now think about this from a modular sense, right? Are they using all the different components of your product as designed and as intended? Are they using them often? Are there parts of the platform that they aren't using and adopting? All of that will be kind of bucketed under adoption. That fourth one there is customer journey. Now, some folks like to either design unique health scores for customers based on where they are in the journey, but it could also be to lean in, right? Maybe you say that there are some different rules here that suggest a customer in their second year of partnership or third year of partnership have a higher propensity to stay, and so therefore they're healthier, right? So you might want to lean into different things like that. So it could be how long they're in the partnership, where they are in their journey within their current subscription. So it's different elements that you might want to consider as part of your customer journey, right? So think maybe a customer who's in onboarding, and then you're looking at, well, how many days are they on onboarding? That could be a metric of measurement that rolls up under this journey category. So all four of those, hopefully I've done a good job introducing those conceptually. And then you've got the four on the right. So the first one at the top there is payment. Every CFO loves me because I introduced this idea that if your customers are not paying, there's probably something not right. Now, it could be a credit card was, expired, or the invoice got lost, but usually it's something bigger, right? If your customer is just not cutting the check, they're not paying for the technology, that's probably a signal that something's not going well. Now, it could be you're looking at how delinquency, the volume or the rate of that. So how much are they overdue? Have they never paid at all? It could be a different sets of metrics there, but payment is an important category to also look at. That next one there is relationship. This one I think is pretty critical. In fact, it's usually bucketed in my top three, but the relationships you've developed. Now, this could be how high and wide you're getting into the organization, right? It could be the number of contacts. It could be, how often you're engaging with the executive. It could be, do you know who these people are? And are you tracking the right people at the right levels? So, relationship, again, the metrics that roll up under that category can be slightly different for everybody, but I think making sure that you're managing and measuring your ability to understand your relationship with your customer and the contacts at that organization is critical. The next one there is advocacy. And so this is going to lean in to see, is your customer an advocate for you? So are they serving as a reference? Have they been a referral? Have they spoken at an event? Did they opt into these programs? Did they maybe do a case study with your marketing team? Did they leave you a positive review? There's a whole bunch of things that can get built under advocacy. That's another important category to think about when you're measuring the health of a partnership. And that last one is the sentiment. I believe that it's important to listen to and hear what it is that your customers are saying, and sometimes what they're not saying. But that sentiment category allows you to measure things like, NPS or, CSAT or other surveys that you're sending out. Or quite frankly, if your customer tells you that they absolutely love you or absolutely hate you, capturing their sentiment is an important way to also have that barometer of kind of health into the scoring that you've designed here as well. So these are the 8 categories. Like I said, these are not the only 8. I've seen some folks come up with, I think the most complex one I've seen is like 15 different categories, but you have to understand it when you get to a certain number of categories, right? The dilution and the weight of these things is going to get disproportionate. And so I think depending on the organization, maybe it makes sense to have something super complex. I think I'm bigger on keep it simple, having learned a few things along the way. So again, these are 8 common ones that a lot of our customers are drawing on at ClientSuccess, a lot of what I've done in the past, and even how I'm looking to design and define ours here. So let's get beyond the metrics. What I'm doing here is I'm giving you some KPIs, because I think, some folks struggle with trying to figure out, well, what should I measure, right? What is engagement exactly looking at? So what I want to do is just introduce in a little bit more detail than I did introduce in that first slide, but kind of walk you through how you might want to think about different KPIs. And the way that I think about these is through the lens of asking a question, right? So I think always a KPI or a metric or a data point there is going to answer a question. And you got to make sure that you're asking the right questions in order to get the response that's going to be the most meaningful. So if I look over there at engagement, right, what is the type of engagement? So when I think about this, it's, I think that there's more value in obviously an on-site visit, which I know that we're not doing a ton of these days, but if you had the ability to go meet with your customer in person, it's going to have, a higher weighting, a higher value than if you're just doing video calls. But a video call is going to have a higher weighting than if you're just sending email, right? So it's being able to assess, what type of engagements are you having with your customers? The next one there that I've included is days since the last engagement. So while it's important to know what type of engagement, it's also critical to understand, well, how often are these things happening or how often are they not happening? So again, you might want to say, how many days since we've last engaged with this customer overall? There could also be a desire to go a little bit deeper and say, well, how many days since we've last had our business review? Or like I mentioned, we have a core meeting. It could also be, last time you went on site. So there could also be days overall, but it could also be days since you had a specific level of engagement. You might want to also assess who you've engaged with. And so you might want to look at when was the last time we actually had an engagement with our executive stakeholder, which that can also start to roll into relationship. But in terms of engagement, you might want to, again, measure and say, well, how long since I've engaged with certain people? And again, what was that method of communication? So I think it's important to figure out what does success look like in the journey that you've designed, right? And how you're encouraging your teams to engage. Now, not everyone has a team where they have the ability and the bandwidth to meet with all of their customers, every 2 weeks, or sometimes maybe it's not even monthly. I've talked to teams that they meet with their customers quarterly, and that's intentionally by design because maybe that's all their customers need because their product is so simple and easy to use. It really depends, right? And so I lean in with question recommendations because again, everyone's is going to look very different. So it's not fair for me to say you guys should be saying every 30 days, every 45 days, meeting with the executive stakeholder every 3 months. That's not what this looks like. You've got to figure out what is the right level of engagement for your customers. And then once you've figured that out, that's when you can start to design this back into your health score. The next one is usage. So for this, I really like to assess, if you've got a license model, right? So you're selling licenses to your customers. Is everyone that has a license using it, right? So are they all logging into the platform? If so, how often? If you've got a platform like here at ClientSuccess, I would assume because of how I use it, we use it all day, every day, right? To manage our customers. I would assume our customers who are also managing their customers should be using it daily, right? So how often are they using it? If they're only logging in once a month, it might not be aligned with how they've intended to use it based off of how they told us they're defining success. So understanding how often they're using it. Is there unconsumed licenses? So again, if you are in a license model and you're selling them that way, are there, licenses that are just sitting on the shelf? That could be, cause for alarm because that might be a downsell in the future. And are they using it as intended, right? So again, are they logging in? Are they doing the right things? Are they using the right parts of the platform? For example, if you've got a modular enterprise solution and your customer bought 4 modules, are they using all 4? Are they only logging into 1? So it's important to understand that usage and again, measure it appropriately. So think back to what does the perfect customer look like? And is your customer acting like that perfect customer? And that's when you can start to figure out what those benchmarks of measurement are, right? Like what does healthy look like and what does unhealthy look like? The next one there is adoption. So in this one, I would start to say, are they using the solution in line with their use cases? So if my customer has purchased the product to do, let's just say they want to manage engagements. If I'm using the ClientSuccess model here and they say, you know what, we really just need a place to make sure that we're communicating with our customers often, and we just need to be able to track that. Well, if my customer isn't using engagements in our platform, but that was their intended use case, that would be alarming, right? So I could have that be something that would wait out to say, send a signal, right? This isn't good. You might also want to see, like, again, are they using everything based on what they've purchased? Because again, that's going to lean into downsell, upsell opportunity as well, right? So if they're using everything, great. How do we see if there's other opportunities for them to consume and use more? So again, it's more tied to how they're using it, not are they using it. That next one, their journey, right? So I talked about this a little bit, but it could be tied to their stage, right? Customers that are in onboarding, you might have a higher level of engagement. You might have different usage, right? You might not have a big focus on license consumption and logins every day because they're just in onboarding, right? So maybe there's other metrics you want to track, like, again, on engagement. Are they attending all of our weekly onboarding sessions? That could be one. It could be, did they configure their data integration? That could be something, right? So health scores at different stages in the journey can look different, but also taking into consideration where they are in that journey could influence, again, maybe a higher scoring or a lower scoring if you're looking at the right things, right? Like maybe they're in onboarding and it's taking too long. And so in that instance, that might not be a great thing, right? If they've been in onboarding for 200 days and it's supposed to take 60, that's not great. That might be a signal of risk for you and the team. And obviously you'd want to report on that a lot earlier than 200 days. So it's understanding, does any of your journey metrics influence or impact the health of your customer? Now, I have a customer who I work with, and they have told me, listen, when we get our customers into year 2 and then beyond, those customers, like, our churn rate after year 3 is like dismal. So they actually have an inflated health score when a customer gets into year 2 and then again in year 3 and anything beyond. And so I thought that was really neat because it took something that I didn't really consider, right? Like, oh, do my customers have a higher propensity to stay if they've been with us over a certain period of time? Now, some organizations, maybe a customer has been with you for a long time, it's actually a little bit riskier because their use cases, evolve and they change. Their business gets bigger. They might outgrow you as a business, right? So in some businesses, that might be considered risky. In others, that might be a health signal. So you've got to figure out, again, what does that look like for your business? The fifth one there is payment. So I leaned into a couple of things here, but it could be, have they paid their most current invoice? Is always a good one. Are they paying? And is there an outstanding balance? Just because they paid their last invoice doesn't mean that they are up to date in all their payments. So again, 2 different metrics that you're looking at, both falling into that same category. So again, these aren't the only 2. You might not be interested in tracking anything on payment, but if you are, there's some things that you can start to look at. Relationship. This could start to measure things like, do you and are you mapped to the right people, right? It could be the number of contacts and relationships you've engaged with, right? If you're tracking all of your engagements, great. Have I talked to all of our main, stakeholders? When was the last time I spoke with our executive? Do we have a multi-threaded relationship, not only with our customer, but in our internal organization? So for me, that might be, am I involved in any of my customers in addition to our CSMs, right? Do we have any relationship with our product team in that customer? So not just making sure that we are not single threaded on the customer side, but you also don't want to be single threaded in your organization. I'm sure many of you have experienced turnover with some employee, right? Now think about it. If they're the only one that has a relationship with your customer and they leave, that puts you in a really interesting situation, right? You've got to start from scratch and rebuild those relationships. So single-threaded relationships is risky on both sides. So you've got to make sure that they are multi-threaded and that you've got different layers of relationships happening. You should also look to see if you feel like your customer has identified you as a trusted advisor. That status is not an easy one to achieve. There is a book on trusted advisor if you're interested in reading that. I've heard a lot of people introduce themselves to customers as trusted advisors. You can't introduce yourself as a trusted advisor. You have to earn that right. But that is a really cool thing if you do get to that level with your customers. I've probably only done it myself a handful of times, and I can name all 5 of those customers when I was a CSM that would have referred to me as a trusted advisor. But if you get to that level of relationship status, that's like the holy grail. So that might actually influence your health score, right? On a very positive way. That next one there is sentiment. I'm sure many of you, maybe not all, but you're probably doing some level of surveying with your customers. It seems to be pretty popular these days. So you could just be doing a standard NPS. Maybe you're doing CSAT as well, but maybe you've got some surveys that are helping you understand how your customer feels about the partnership. Now, again, it doesn't need to be exclusive through surveys. You could be capturing that sentiment in conversations. It could be, hey, you know what? I got off a call with my customer and they're really frustrated, right? The product isn't doing what they need it to do. It's very buggy. We've got all these tickets in support. That's probably a signal for you to say that your customer sentiment is probably not very positive at this moment. And if you go and send that notice to your health score, right, that's going to help make sure that you guys, again, have that proper visibility on how things are going. Now, it's not just about how they're feeling about the product. It could be their frustration with the experience they have, right? So it's important to assess, feedback and sentiment all different ways and angles. There are even some cool tools that will capture that through AI and machine learning that I think are pretty neat. But however you are capturing that sentiment, it's important that you pull that in and account for that somewhere in your health score. The last one there is advocacy. And I talked about this before, but this is your customer, right? You're asking questions like, are they willing to serve as a reference for you? Have they participated in any of your customer marketing initiatives? This could be a case study, a use case, speaking at an event, participating in a webinar. It could be that, they've willingly opted into your reference referral program, right? So have they served as one? Even going beyond the have they opted in? Have they actually done one? Did they leave a review for you, right? How many review sites are out there, right? So many. I know a lot of folks use things like G2 and others. Well, if your customer is out there unsolicited and writing really positive things about you, that's probably a good indicator that you've hit some level of advocacy with them, in which case that should positively influence your health score. So we have just gone through these 8 categories. I've given you a couple things to start thinking about what the right metrics are for you. But again, guys, you might look at this and not see anything that's relevant for you, related to you. That's okay. Remember, health scores are so personal and specific to each business that there probably are going to be some of these outliers that aren't common. So the next thing I want to talk about is the weighting. Now, please ignore everything on the slide that says, here's the percentages. This isn't what I'm recommending to you. What I am introducing here is the fact that not all metrics are created equal, right? So when I think about how I break out our metrics, and I'll walk you through how I've configured ours here at ClientSuccess, but the weighting is important because, again, if your customer is paying or not paying, like I said, there could be some false indicators there that say like, oh, well, you know what, the credit card was declined because the person who was using their credit card, they don't work here anymore. And so we just never updated it on file. It doesn't mean go sound the alarm that the customer is going to churn, right? So you got to think about the appropriate weighting for you. For me, I think how my customer engages with me is super important because we have a high engagement model. Now, you might have a low engagement model, and if you do, that's totally okay. You might have complete automation. Engagement might not even make it to your health score, right? So it's important to figure out what is it going to be for your organization. So for me, engagement's important. Usage and adoption are important, right? I also want to make sure my customer is buying technology, right? If they're not using that technology, that's probably not a good indication of health. So I think about those two things at a pretty high percentage also. And then I think about the relationship. And those probably of all of these, those are my top 4. So it's engagement, usage, adoption, and relationship. But like I said, those are my 4 biggies. Your 4 might look so different, right? You might over-index on sentiment, or you know what, maybe it is on journey or advocacy, and that's cool. But again, the idea here, not everything is created equal. You've got to figure out what your kind of makeup is. And guess what? There's going to be trial and error. You're going to have to test things and see what works. And this is where we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but like the ability to go back and after collecting some amount of data to go back and say, you know what, actually our score isn't really working the way we'd like it to. We've got to tweak these things, or we've over indexed on this, or we've under indexed on that. So it's important to, again, remember your weighting will be unique, but not all things are created equal, right? Even as I think about engagement or usage or adoption, not even all the KPIs that sit within that category are sometimes created equal. So you've really got to do your diligence here and think about this and make sure that it makes sense for your business, and that it also aligns with what your customers need and what they're doing and how they behave. So the next thing I've got here is the type. I get asked this question all the time, but Kristi, should we have more than one health score? you can have as many health scores as you want. I am not the authority on how many you should have. If you want to have 10, go have 10. I say it takes a lot of time to maintain and manage and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. But I will say I've seen 3 common types where you see diversification in health scores. One is at the segment level, right? So maybe there are folks that want to create a different health score for their different customer segments, right? If you've got strategic accounts and then you have an SMB or emerging segment, well, maybe in your top segment, you're highly engaged, right? It's a high engagement model. And so engagement actually has a big piece of your pie. But in your SMB, you've got full automation. And so there's no engagement there, which in that case, your health score will look very different. So it's important to maybe start with one to just start testing the waters and the idea of having a health score. But when you get to that point, if your customers do look and behave very different at the segment level, I would definitely recommend thinking about creating a health score that is unique to each of your segments. The next one is stage. This also could be reflective, and I talked a little bit about how you might use customer journey as a category and taking that data in, but you could also go and create different segments, health scores rather, for customers at different stages. For example, your customers behave different in the onset, right? Like, so as they're going through onboarding, your engagement might be through the roof. You might be meeting with your customers weekly or daily, but their usage is going to be low because you're focused on configuration and training and enablement, right? So to have a health score during onboarding that looks and emulates the same thing as it would for a customer that's maybe in like year 3 might look very different. So it's important to think about that. Do we need to have a different health score for our different stages? And listen, maybe it's just onboarding and the rest of the journey. Some of you might just say, you know what, onboarding does look and feel very different. So we're going to create one for our customers that are in onboarding because it's important for us to identify the health during that critical stage. It's the most important time in the partnership. So yes, we're gonna dial in these metrics and we're gonna pay close attention to the scoring, because if they are not behaving right during that stage, we've got to sound those alarms. But everything that happens after that will look and feel more the same. And so we don't want to create, we can standardize and have one health score that will work anything beyond that onboarding. So again, it's important to think about your customers and how you expect them to behave at different stages. And that third one there is by vertical, or this could be industry, right? So I've seen, depending on the platforms, if you've got customers that are in retail and e-commerce, they might look and behave the same way. If you've got customers who are in, insurance, they might behave the same way. If you've got customers who are in SaaS, they might behave the same way. And so all 3 of those might be very different. So it might warrant you having a specific health score for each type of either vertical or industry, so you can dial into those. So that's that third bucket. And like I said, there is a ton of these. These are not the only 3. These are the 3 most common that I've come across that I've said, yeah, okay, if that was me, I could justify creating health scores for these different things. So this is something else you might want to take a step back at, reflect and see, does it make sense? Do we need multiple health scores for this type of breakdown? Okay, now we get into the plan. If you're creating a health score just so that you can report up to your executives that you have a health score, you're doing it wrong, right? Your health score should be the action plan for your team. It should be the impetus of how they work and what they do and how and when they do it. So when I think about how to really operationalize a health score or behavior score or whatever you want to call it, I break it down into my 3 I's, which the first one there is identify, the second is ideate, and my third is intervene. Now, the first one, identify, right? The coolest thing about your health score is if you've got it working right, you're going to be able to see clear as day where your team needs to focus their time and attention. And remember, your team should not only be focusing on customers that are at risk. If you ignore the healthy customers, they will inevitably end up at risk, and then you're on this hamster wheel. So it's important to just identify who the customers are and what you need to do with them, right? And it could be, today I'm going to focus on all my super, super healthy customers because I've got to really drill down and figure out, what my growth strategy is for my book of business. So I want to go and look at that and say, great, where's the best way for me to go and target some growth, right? And start to build out my upsell. Could be, I've got some customers who are really just passive in the partnership. They're not really engaged. They're not at risk. They're kind of using the platform, but they're not as engaged as a lot of our customers should be. And so maybe I've got to figure out a way to reinvigorate the partnership or draw them back in, get them back engaged. So again, it doesn't need to be customers that are at risk. There's lots of things that you can do. You just got to make sure that you're identifying the right information and then coming up with the right plan, which leads us to step 2, which is ideate. And this is being able to take the data and what you've identified, right, in that first part, and then figure out, well, great, now what do I have to do with this information? Now that I know that these customers are either primed for growth or they're at risk or, they're just kind of floating around. Maybe I've got customers that are up for renewal that I've got to work with. It's important to figure out what your plan is. And so that second one is ideate, right? You've got to figure out, are there playbooks that I should be deploying? Do I have to come up with a get well plan? Is there a save plan required because we're too close to the renewal, right? Can I capitalize on the opportunity? But this is where you got to develop those next steps. So this is all about preparing to take action, because you have to prepare before you just start doing things. So this is you ideating, coming up with, okay, well, what do we do now? And that leads us to the step 3, which is intervene. Now, remember, I told you intervention is not a bad word. It's not something you do when your customers are at risk. It's just time to take action, right? You've got to just insert yourself. And this could be at all different points in time based on all different triggers and flags. At the end of the day, your job also in customer success, if you've got a high engagement model, especially, right, you want to make sure that you're helping guide your customers in a very strategic way. So sometimes even just healthy customers who aren't using the platform the way that they should based off of their definition of success. Great. Intervene, lean in and say, hey, I've noticed this is the way you've configured this. And I see based on usage data, this is how your team is using it. Well, let me show you how other customers who look like you, who are trying to achieve the same thing, let me tell you what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? I'm intervening, but not because there was risk, because there was an opportunity to help and support my customers get more value from the partnership in our product. So intervention is not bad. It is just your need to dive in, use that data to take action. So I won't spend too much more time on this. Should be clear. Use the data, identify your customers to target, come up with your plan and your action plan, right? What are the steps you need to take? And then go and take those steps. If you've got a team who is not doing stuff with your health score, it's time to revisit your health score or go retrain your team. But typically what I found, it's not the team's willingness to do something. It's that the health score isn't telling them the right things and they're not sure what they should do from there. So go revisit that if that's not the model that you're seeing right now. If you don't see that this is how your team is using it, it's time to step in. Now, if you do all of this, right, you hopefully should see some impact. So when I've seen a good health score configured, when I've seen all the right KPIs pulled in, when I've seen it constructed with the right weighting, and I've seen my team use it, right, really, really use it, I've seen the following. I've seen an increase in my customers' value, right? Our ability to intervene when my customers aren't doing the right things, not because I think that they need to be doing them, but because based on what they've told us, they want to use the platform for. If they're not doing those things, step in and help them, right? Use those early warning signs as an opportunity to lean in and help, right? That's what it is. So your customers should be getting a ton more value from the partnership as a result of your well-constructed score. The second one is hopefully increased retention, right? If you have the ability to get ahead of things early, right? You understand bad behavior, you're identifying bad behavior before it's really bad, it just doesn't look so good. You can intervene and get things back on track. And that's huge. And if you can do that in a timely enough manner, hopefully it's before your customers have decided that this might not be the best path forward for them. With 3, hopefully you're increasing your advocacy pool. This is huge, right? Your marketing team, if you're using a customer success management platform and your marketing team does not have access, go get them a license, even one to share, but there is so much cool customer data that should be living in your health score, that your marketing team should be able to say, oh my gosh, look, this customer uses this platform the exact way that they should. I want to go reach out to them, do a case study. Or, oh my gosh, they're highly engaged. I saw the review that they left. I wonder if they'd be willing to be part of our reference program or a referral program, right? There's tons of stuff that you can unearth here in a very positive way that you should capitalize on, because your customer advocates are your biggest sales engine. Now, the residual impact of that, 10x. So go build your advocates today. That fourth one is increase NRR. I'm big on this one. We talked about using like usage data and adoption data, right? I love being able to see early when my customers, wow, you've consumed all your licenses. Great. Now is probably a good time for me to lean in and see if there's an opportunity for us to do more together. Or if you're consuming all of the products that we've used, great. Maybe it's time where you're at a place where you're advancing your use cases in your program so much so that I can introduce an upsell or cross-sell, right? So this actually data can help feed your pipeline. Now, if you're not the team running your growth, right? Think about it as a customer success qualified lead, a CSQL. You can then go feed this information to your sales team or your account management team or whatever team that you're partnering with. It's not solely got to be used by your team only. So think about all of the cross-functional benefit of having a good, well-constructed score. If your customer is not using the product well, have your product team reach out and find out why. Maybe it's usability is the issue. Maybe there's bugs in the platform that your product team should go here. So there is limitless value if you've got this structured the right way. And the more you can disseminate this information across the organization, the better. All right, so what I did say I would do is introduce you to what I've built here at ClientSuccess. We are in the process of redefining what it looks like. Like I said, I'm a big fan of simplicity, so I've scaled back some of what we're doing. So I'm just gonna walk you through at a high level what I've constructed, why I'm focusing on it, and we will make sure that we'll get plenty of time for Q&A. So the first thing is I introduced 8 metrics earlier. I skimmed that down. The 5 that were most important for me based off of how I'm watching our customers and how I want to lean in with our program is going to be adoption, usage, relationship, engagement, and sentiment. Okay. Now, the other thing I've shown you here is that one, if you look over here, that little gray bar on the side, I've called it my customer behavior score, not their health score, but more importantly, it's, are my customers behaving the right way? Are they doing the things that would lead me to believe that they're getting what they need from my team? Because people's actions speak louder than words, right? So how they're behaving is a huge indicator of how my team and I need to support them. So the first thing there, adoption, I've got that weighted, tied with engagement at 25%. Right? I want to make sure that my customers are highly engaged. We have a high engagement model. If I'm not talking to and supporting my customers on an ongoing basis in a valuable way, right? What are we doing? That's the way we structured our model. That's what we should be like working towards. So engagement's a big one. Adoption, it's got to be up there because my customers have to use the product that they bought. It would be great if they were speaking with me every day, but if they weren't using the product at all, I've got a problem. Now, adoption to me is slightly more valuable of a metric than usage, because I don't need to see that my customers logging in 100 times a week. If my customer is logging in 5 times a week, but using the product the right way that's aligned with their model and their customers, then I feel like that's a better indicator for me. Now, relationship is super important, but I've simplified it, right? Right now, I just want to make sure we're connected to the right people. I will eventually think about layering in additional relationship metrics, but to start, are we connected to the right people in the organization so we can start to build those relationships? And the next one there is sentiment. I do care about how my customers feel about us. I do care about what they're saying about us. And so sentiment is important. We do have a survey program that we are enhancing. So in addition to doing NPS, we'll have a whole bunch of other metrics that we're pulling in, which will help me understand how our customers feel and what they're thinking about the partnership. So that's an introduction to the metrics that I'm using and how I've weighted them out. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my mouse was not working. So with regards to the KPIs, I've broken this down a couple different ways. So with adoption, for us, there's a lot of core different modules in our platform, but I know that there's 3 that really are going to help me understand, are my customers using the product in a way that's going to drive value based off of what I know to be true of the outcomes of our solution. So those are going to be our customer pulse, which is probably our single most popular part of the product, which allows you to basically indicate if your customer is very satisfied, at risk, right? And all the different scorings in between allows you to leave notes and put next steps, right? So Pulse is super valuable. I've got customers who might continue to be partners for us in perpetuity just because Pulse alone is so powerful. So if my customer is using Pulse, that's great. If they're not, that's a problem. Engagements. Most people are using this to keep track of the communication and manage the engagement they have with their customers. It's usually our customers have a high engagement model with their customers, so that's important to track. So if my customer is using engagements, that's a good indicator. And the last one is success cycles, right? We want to proactively be able to help our teams understand what to do at the right times, right? So think playbooks. That's what our success cycles are. So if our customers are operationalizing their program and they're using our success cycles, strong indication that we've got good adoption. So those are 3 things that I'm tracking that I've said, again, these are important. If my customers are using these 3 parts of the platform, I feel good. Now, is that all I ever want to track? No, but I said I wanted to refine how we were doing this and simplify it a bit so we can then figure out where we want to go from here. The next one is tied to usage. So I want to understand, are my customers logging into the platform regularly? And if so, how much time are they spending? Now, again, I said this might not make sense for everybody because everyone's platform and use cases are different. But for me, again, we're managing our customers in a high engagement model, which means we're on the platform all day, every day. We live in it the way salespeople should be living in Salesforce or their CRM. And so if our customers aren't using it regularly, it could be they have few customers, their engagement model is different, but typical use cases would reflect high usage on a regular basis and a long time spent in there. So those are 2 things that I would say are, again, we try to solve for that 80-20. I'm definitely going to have 20% of my customers that aren't going to meet the exact criteria here, but this will help me understand that. Relationship, I want to understand, we've got 4 different role types that we track really heavily. And so I need to make sure that we understand who those key players are and that we are engaging with them regularly. The 4th one on engagement, making sure that we're connecting with our customers. And I set the target there in the past 40 days because I try to make sure that we're speaking with our customers at least every month, but vacations, meetings moving, board meetings, right? There's always something that comes up. So I give a 10-day wiggle room there and say 40, but for me, the bandwidth is 30. We should be engaging with our customers at least every month, right? And especially if we've got different folks that we're mapped to, and we're multi-threaded on both sides, it's not all solely sitting on the CSM. We should be able to engage. And that last one is, what's the sentiment we've heard from our customers in the past 90? And so this is going to capture their feedback from any one of the surveys that we've sent out. I'm also big on measuring, did our customers not respond at all? Usually it's the quiet ones that are a bit more suspicious. So looking into that, right? Did they give us any feedback? If so, what did that look like? And if they didn't, that's something else we'll have to dig into. So these are the 5 different categories. These are some of the KPIs that we're tracking. And just to give you a quick little snapshot into how easy this is to configure for us on our end, here's a little clean snapshot of our configuration of a success score, right? Which allows me to create all of my different metric groups. So you'll see there on the left, I have adoption and usage, relationship, engagement, and sentiment. Each of those have a percentage weighting that I can go and control. And then I can add a multitude of metrics there. But again, like I said, we're simplifying it to 3 to start because that's what I want to start to collect the data around. So super easy, super dialed in, and really focus on our customers and helping me understand their behavior so my team can intervene. So I will leave you. I did have 5. Yep, there we go. My key takeaways. So before we go into Q&A, I'll make this quick. Make sure that you are clear on these, right? Every health score is unique. It should reflect the story you want to tell about your customers. Do not be worried about what mine looks like. Don't worry about what anyone else's look like. And do not, if you are a leader, use the exact same configuration you used at your previous company. It won't work. So make sure it's different and unique and it's special and it should be yours. Number two, go back every 3 to 6 months and review the performance and make changes as needed. I don't know that I did this as much as I should have in the past. I definitely did it, but probably the cadence was off. But I used to go back and take the data and say, okay, great. For all of my customers who stayed with us, who renewed, did their health score reflect that they should or could have, or they would have? And for my customers that churned, did I have a bunch of like bright green accounts churning? Right? Because then all of my things need to be dialed in a bit different. So I do think it's good. Go back, review your data, make sure that it's actually telling an accurate story, and then go make changes, right? Iterate early and often. Number three, start simple. Do not try to over-engineer your health score. It could get crazy, right? I told you about the customer that I've worked with who had 15. It's okay. The 15 worked for them, but you can start to get a little, overwhelmed by all the data, and it might not all speak together in the right way. So just really think about it. And if you're just getting started, start small. Four, make sure your team understands how to use your health score. Make sure that, they're putting it to use. So again, for that, like identify, ideate, and intervene. Educate your team on that, right? Like you do a session, train them on it, make sure that they're clear, like, hey, if this does this, then you do that. It's cool if you have playbooks tied to your health score, but if you don't, just make sure you're educating them. But if you have to put your health score to action. And the last one there is, again, focus on getting access to the right data. I will tell you, even if this takes a ton of time and you are waiting and waiting and waiting, can't do anything, please, that is probably the most critical thing, is getting the data right. Because again, as I mentioned, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good, accurate, clean, current data, it's not going to help you. So don't bother. All right, so I do want to leave time for Q&A. I went a little fast there at the end, but I will stop now and I'll turn it back to Dave, who will tee up some awesome questions, I'm sure.
Okay, the chat is blowing up like usual, Kristi. A lot of great questions, a lot of great engagement across the team. Love that we're making a lot of connections in the industry with each of you. Hopefully you enjoy this. Couple questions. One from Alexandra. At which point in your customer's journey should you implement a health score? I mean, should it right from the beginning, if you're an early stage startup and you're one of the first customer success professionals, should you start then? Should you wait? Just your thoughts on when is the time to implement a health score framework for your company?
Like I said, you can actually do something very simple. It could be two metrics, right? I want to make sure that my customers are being onboarded in 30 days, and I want to make sure that they're talking to me once every other month, right? It could be that simple. And that could be an early indicator for you to have some health visibility. So I don't think that it's ever too early. I would just say the earlier you are, the probably the simpler it should be.
Okay, great. The difference between data-driven sentiment and human-provided sentiment. Can you share a little bit of thoughts on that?
Yes. So I intentionally, for those who aren't familiar with the ClientSuccess platform, we do have this awesome part of our product called Pulse, which I talked about. And that's our ability internally, our team, to go, whether it's Dave, me, our CSMs, our product team, anybody can go and adjust that once they've heard some feedback or collected some feedback from our customer, and we can use that to adjust. But in the health score, for me, I want to be able to track their behaviors and what they are giving to us proactively. And so there are two different abilities to capture that. I used to have my previous one, I had something called CSM sentiment, which was layered into my health score, and the CSMs would go and give the customer red, yellow, green, and it was their pulse check on the customer. And that was factored into the health score. So those are two different things, right? Your data collected and then what you're hearing directly from your customer. Also, don't forget, surveys go out to a multitude of people. You could also be connecting with a multitude of people. So I think it's important to take all that data and think about it, but then also just use it the best way possible. So I'm tracking what my customers are giving me versus what I am hearing from them and leaning in with my own pulse.
Okay, great. Here's one. Are you aware of like some false positive indicators? Do you have any examples of that where you've got data that you're bringing in, but maybe sending you the wrong signals? Any thoughts on that?
Gosh, it's going to be very unique to every business, but I'll tell you a quick little story, which will help you hopefully think about your business the same way. We had a customer who their team was logging in every single day right? All day, every day, but we hadn't had any engagement with them because we figured we'd focus our time and energy on another customer, and they needed us more because this customer is just like, they're crushing it. They're in there all day, every day. So we didn't engage with them. We had almost minimal relationships. We just figured, oh my God, just leave them alone. Let them keep doing it. So we didn't lean in. As a result, all of a sudden, one day, usage stopped. We found that all of their data had been disconnected and nobody was logging into the platform. And we didn't have any relationships built. And so that was a false indicator for us, because what happened was the customer was using it because they had to, but in parallel, they were actually deploying a competitive solution. And then one day hit the switch, put all of their data out of our platform into their platform, and they churned. And this was not here at ClientSuccess. This was at another company, because Dave's face is making, this was at another company, but this was crazy because we thought we put so much value in that usage and adoption, where we over-indexed on that and didn't focus on some of the other things. And as a result, we didn't use it well. And so that was a false indicator, because we thought they were happy. So that's an example, but it could look different everywhere.
That's an awesome example. I've seen that in my past life as well. Last one, I know we're running out of time. Have you ever shared the details of the health score with your customers?
Yes. Yeah. I'm big on transparency. In fact, I'm sure I've got customers who are on this webinar right now who just saw our secret sauce of how I'm assessing their partnership with us. I don't see that there's any reason why you shouldn't. And I think if you can introduce that early to say, here's what we're looking at, and here's how we're going to assess the partnership from our standpoint, I think that it makes things less awkward when you are intervening and you are leaning in, right? So I think it just sets better expectations for the partnership and for everyone involved. So I'm big on sharing.
Great. I think we're out of time, but thanks so much, Kristi. Thanks for everybody who joined. Another great session by Kristi. And just in case you haven't heard, we will send these out as a recording. We will, within the next 48 hours, you'll get an email with the recording, with templates, with other tools that you'll be able to use. If you don't receive that, you can always go to the ClientSuccess website at www.clientsuccess.com and go to the resources. You'll see webinars, you'll see templates there. All of that material will also be posted there. So thank you for coming today. Remember, next week, same time, same place, we'll have the next session. Kristi will deliver some more awesome sauce and knowledge bombs then. Kristi, thanks again for today. And any final words?
No, I guess I'm seeing so many chats go by that everyone's going to go back now and look at their health score. So I think that is the big takeaway. So just take a moment, go look at what you've got configured. If you're not the leader, ask your leader why maybe they designed it the way they did, right? So I think if you're a CSM who isn't really clear on the metrics and the why behind your configuration, I think it's great to be informed. So either go revisit it if you haven't yours and you're a leader, go check it out. And if you're a CSM, go make sure that you're clear on how to use your health score better.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kristi. Thanks for everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.